Okay, so we just said that there's a query object on the page, and now we're looking at the RefreshSheets subroutine, and let's look at it as the complete code in here. You can see it's very short and very simple, and basically it says with this workbook. So remember, that's just a shorthand so that you don't have to keep writing this workbook dot sheets name. You can just write dot sheets name. But actually there's another with in here, so we want to avoid a little extra work. Actually, I'm not sure why. I thought you would be able to do with this workbook dot sheets sheet name, so you wouldn't have to have a double with here. But maybe he's doing it like this. So you can try it maybe using it this dot this, and then only have a single with, and see if that works. Or, I'm sorry, dot this. Anyway, so this says this workbook dot sheets sheet name dot activate, and it also says this workbook dot sheets sheet name cells 1-1. I'm sorry, cells 1, 1 select. So we're selecting the first cell. In other words, the A1 cell. And finally, the last thing it does is here, and this only works if you have that query object that I said on the sheet. Now, so you have to do this on a sheet that has that query object. We are, because we're going to be doing it on sheet name, but the user is, or the user meaning get data. Let's find this. Copy get data. Get new data rather. Find this. It's here. So we're doing it only on sheets that have that query object on them. In other words, that have a query associated with them. So, going back now to RefreshSheets. So this works in that case, and all it does is it refreshes that query that we already set up. Now remember, in that query, we had properties. We had saved the query definition, so that's why it will work. When we refresh it, it has the query in it, and it can refresh it. So all it does is refresh it and get new data and probably a new ranking. Of course, not on TripAdvisor, but on the stats sheet, for example. Okay, let's look at his discussion. So it's a very short routine, and that's the last routine we have to talk about. This subroutine runs once for every query sheet. Well, that means for each book, or each version of each book. It's called by the main get new data subroutine. We saw that. We saw where it was called just now. And here's the first line. The name of the query sheet is passed as an argument with that. Okay, so actually here he's only doing it in one line, like I said, but here he's doing it with two with statements. So I don't know why he did it with two, but you can do it with just one also. A with block is initiated so that subsequent objects, properties, and methods that begin with a dot, like this, are taken to belong to the sheet name in this workbook. Activate. The current query sheet is activated so that its query can be run. First we select the A1 cell. Select cell A1. Earlier I recommended that you cause the queries to return the results beginning in cell A1. If you adopt that recommendation, you know that the query results include that cell A1, and if you select it, you'll be able to refresh the query. it's necessary that a cell in the query results range be active for the refresh to take place. So it has to be an active cell, otherwise it won't work. So that's why they activate it. That's why they activate it and select it. Refresh the query. Set background query to false. So that's, remember we had, I just discussed that. We have it in our current setting here. Enable background refresh is not false, but I guess we want to make sure that it does it that way by also having it in our current refreshing of that. Okay, so we have this, and this is going to refresh it, and just let's do a little search and learn how to read some of Microsoft's documentation. So I'd like to know, for example, is this a method or a property? In other words, is it like a, I shouldn't say function, but is it like a function or is it like a property? And the distinctions are in this language are not very clear, actually. In most languages they're quite clear. But anyway, let's just look up this in Google. So I did a search, put in Excel to make sure that it said knew it was Excel, and I click on this one, and this is the Microsoft part of the documentation, and they tell me that it's a method. Okay, now one thing that you need to know about VBA, which is not necessarily true of other languages. Unfortunately, VBA is kind of messy, and that's because it's what you might call has legacy issues. In other words, it came from another language, which came from another language, and so it carries some of those past rules with it. Anyway, read this. So normally, for a method, you would have brackets. It doesn't just mean not just for methods, but for properties in this language. It's true. But anyway, normally for methods, you always have brackets. The brackets or parentheses are required, however, only in VBA, only if you assign the result of the property or method to a variable or use it in a with block. Now, the parentheses are optional otherwise. Now, if we look at where we used it, according to this, it is being used in a with block, so the parentheses should be necessary, but apparently they're not. So I'm not 100% sure about this situation, but I was trying to clarify whether this was a method or not. And it is a method, so we should have parentheses around this. And actually this would not be like that, but rather would be just false. I would remove this part here. Okay. Anyway, let's look a little bit more. So here's telling us about it. And the background query is the argument for this refresh method. It seems to be the only one. Now if we find background query here, we click on it. Background query is a property, and it's a Boolean, so it's either going to be true or false. So I believe, although I didn't try it, I believe that you could write parentheses here and then close parentheses over here, and just write false. And get rid of this. And just have false parentheses, false parentheses. Sorry, yeah. Okay, but since he didn't do it that way, I won't do it that way. Anyway, that's just to show you a little of the documentation and how to read it. Okay, so finally, refresh the query, set the background query to false so that the code does not continue while the refresh is taking place. And with end sub. Terminate the with block and end the subroutine. Okay, finally we finished all the coding for the VBA. Now we have to still do this stuff here a little bit more. And we haven't even begun to do predictive analytics yet. But hopefully we will get there when we start this chapter here.